everybody, welcome back to my channel. I thought for this week's video I would try a storytime video. Some of the best stories that Dan and I have to share are when we took flights back to the Midwest and back home from the Midwest to visit family. When we first moved to Charlotte, whenever we would want to go back to visit family, we thought we can't justify driving 12 hours to see them because that's an entire day gone. We would essentially have to take 2 extra days off for vacation just to drive there and back. And so we thought we'll save up money and we'll buy plane tickets so that whenever we go to visit, couple of hours, boom, done, we're there. None of our flights ever really worked out like that. Every flight we took had a connecting flight, a layover somewhere else, because those were the cheaper flights and we aren't about to spend hundreds upon hundreds of dollars on plane tickets. On the very first flight that we took to go visit family, our plane boarded at 6 a.m. So we got up, and luckily we only live about 20 minutes away from the airport here in Charlotte. So we got up at probably like 4 a.m. Got everything ready, got in the car, got to the airport, parked, got through security, got everything done. We were feeling good about ourselves. We're like, all right, we did this right, we're adults. Get to where the terminal is, and we sit down, and Dan goes, I think I forgot my phone in the car. And I go, you better run. So he leaves all of his luggage with me. Now, mind you, the flight is boarding in like 20 minutes. So he goes as fast as he can without security getting suspicious of him, out to the car to go retrieve his phone. About 10 minutes pass. And I'm sitting here by myself with all of this luggage around me, watching as the clock just ticks down the time before the flight boards and leaves without us. And my phone rings, and it's Dan. And I go, hey! And he goes, hey! I got my phone! But I found out we parked in the wrong spot. So he moves the car, because apparently we had parked in short-term parking instead of long-term parking. So we would have been paying double what we needed to be paying. So that was a blessing in and of itself. And all the while, I'm sitting with all this luggage in like my pajamas, because I didn't get dressed up to go on the airplane, and I'm like twiddling my thumbs, waiting, and suddenly they start boarding the plane. And I'm like, okay. And now I get nervous and anxious really easily, but I bundle it all up inside to try to hide it as much as possible. So I'm watching these first class people board, and I'm like, okay, let's hope somebody trips and falls, and it takes like 10 minutes to get it resolved. Nobody did, everybody was fine. Luckily. That's so mean. I'm watching everybody board. All of these chairs around me that were filled with people are now slowly emptying, and I'm sitting there panicking inside, but trying to remain calm while I wait, and the minutes tick by, and finally I hear the girl over the intercom, and mind you, she is like 20 feet that way from me. And she looks at me while she's doing these final calls because she knows that I'm supposed to be on that flight. She knows. So she looks at me while she makes these calls, and she's like, last call boarding for Schuler. Like, it was literally a Ferris Bueller's Day Off moment.
Bueller.
And I go up to her, and immediately, I want to start crying, because in circumstances where things are not working out perfectly, my body has this tendency to overreact and immediately need to cry. I go up to the counter, and I'm like trying to calmly explain to her that my husband had to go back to the car and he is on his way, and I'm just waiting for him to get back before we can get on the plane. And it comes out not like that, but more along the lines of, my husband is on the way back. He had to get his phone out of the car, and I'm sorry. He's hurrying. It was beyond a doubt clear to both of us that she knew that I was on the verge of tears and failing to hold them back. Like, my voice was cracking. It was awful. And she goes, I can only leave the door open for another minute or so. So I'm waiting, and finally she looks at me and she goes, I have to close the doors. Do you see him coming down the hallway? And so I go down the hallway and I look, and there's not a single person in that hallway. Usually airports are filled. It was a ghost town down this hallway. I just slowly turn around and go. So she goes, I have to close these doors. Hold on, I'll be back to get you some, like, delayed tickets or whatever. So she goes, closes the door. I sit down and I'm like wiping tears back. Literally 2 minutes later, Dan gets there. And I explained what happened to him, and I was so frustrated. I was not frustrated at him because this was something we both could have avoided equally. I was just very frustrated at the situation in general. So I told him what was going on. I told him that we had to wait until she came back. So a couple more minutes passed. She comes back, we go up to the counter. She was like, I have these standby tickets for the next flight to Atlanta. She's like, it doesn't leave for about 3 hours. But if there's any openings, if anybody cancels, if somebody doesn't turn up, you guys will be able to get on. You'll just have to be in the standby line. And we said, that's okay, we don't mind. We take those tickets, go to that terminal and sit down, frustrated, wait the 3 hours, that flight starts to board, and then they start to call standby people, and they call them by the names. We're like listening for Schuler to be called, and it's never called.
Bueller.
So we go up to the counter, we find out when the next flight to Atlanta is, and they go, it's not for another 3 hours. We go to the new terminal, and we wait for another 3 hours. Finally, this flight, over 6 hours after our original flight was supposed to take off, our names get called for the standbys, and we're able to get on the plane. We're on like opposite ends of the plane from each other, which we didn't care. We just wanted to get on the flight. And we fly to Atlanta. We get to Atlanta. We have about an hour or so until the next flight, which again, we're on standby for because clearly by this point we missed our original connecting flight. So we end up going to a sub shop that was in the airport and we eat, and while we're sitting in the food court eating, we overhear conversation from these people at the table next to us talking about their job with Revive Indiana. And we go, wait, Dan's best friend is in Revive Indiana. So we look and we get to talking to them and we find out that they know his best friend. So we got to talk to them, which was actually super cool, and they prayed for us because we told them our situation and how frustrating it was, and they left, and we went to our terminal and waited for the flight and just thought, if we had made our original flight, we would have never met them. We would have never got to have that awesome conversation with them. So it ended up all working out in the end. And luckily, the flight from Atlanta to our final destination was totally hassle-free. We got on the plane immediately. We got to sit next to each other, and it was wonderful, and the rest of our vacation was great. Now, another airplane story that we have, because that was only the beginning, that was what kicked off this saga, if you will. Another time, we were on our way back from visiting family in the Midwest, and we had visited them in January. And if any of you are from the Midwest, you know what it looks like in January. Everything is white. Everything has about a foot of snow on it. Everything is cold. We are in an airport in Indiana. The plane gets delayed about an hour, and immediately I'm frustrated because I know if the plane got delayed an hour, chances are something else is gonna happen and we're gonna miss our connecting flight. Now, luckily, our connecting flight, we had about a 2-hour layover before our connecting flight took off. We're waiting in the terminal this extra hour. Finally, the plane gets to us, and the plane had gotten delayed getting to us because it got delayed taking off from its original destination due to snowstorms. So it got to us an hour late, pulled in, taxied in, and all of those people get off. They get everything figured out. We all get on, and we're sitting there. We're waiting, and we're waiting, and we're waiting, and finally they come over the intercom. Well, we've all been on this plane for like a half an hour now, and they come over the intercom and explain how the wings of the plane have ice on them and they can't fly with that, so they have a truck working to get the ice off of the wings of the plane so we can safely fly. We're all waiting and we're near window seats that are near the wings, so I can look out. We're on the right hand side of the plane, so the wing is right here for me, so I can look out the windows over there and see this truck that's working on the one wing and the people that are out there. So we're watching, and I'm watching. Dan had fallen asleep at this point because we had had a full day before we even got to the airport, and then all this happening with the airport just wore us both out. So Dan fell asleep in the seat next to me already. We hadn't even taken off yet. And I'm watching them work on this plane wing. They're working and working and working, and then they keep doing something repeatedly, and it's clearly not going the way they want it to. Half of the plane is now watching them struggle to do this thing that they're trying to do. Finally, the truck leaves. Now, mind you, the truck never came and touched this wing yet. So we're sitting here, almost 45 minutes have gone by now, and we're like, what on earth is happening? Then they come over the intercom again, and they're like, we're so sorry for the delay. The truck that is supposed to be clearing the ice off of the windows is having technical difficulties. So they're getting that fixed, and then they'll be back to finish getting the plane fixed. Flying just makes me really angry. I need to avoid flying. So again, we're waiting. I am beyond frustrated because by this point, I know we have missed our connecting flight. There is not a chance we are making our connecting flight. Finally, a different truck comes and is working on this wing, and they apparently can feel the tension emanating from the plane onto them because they're working like 4 times as fast on this wing as they worked on that wing. So they get that, they're going at it. Dan wakes up and he asks, have we landed? And I go, we've not even taken off. Like, I can barely speak because I'm so frustrated, and I know when I get frustrated, I tend to cry. So I'm like not even speaking, I'm like whispering to him things, because if I speak any louder than a whisper, I'm going to like, bleh. They finally get that fixed. We start taking off, and I can't talk because I'm so angry, and the flight's going. Dan asks me in like a very hushed voice, are you okay? I pull out my phone because I'm not about to have a conversation in such close quarters with people I don't know that could be listening in very easily. So I pull out my phone, pull open the notes tab on my phone. I use lots of different emojis to describe my frustration. These are some of the emojis that I used. Dan misinterpreted that and replied, you want the plane to blow up? In my brain, the emojis were accurately representing my current mood, not what I wanted to happen to anything. So Dan's misinterpretation actually made me laugh. And the entire rest of the flight, we had this notes conversation about what happens if somebody were on a plane in midair and they said bomb. Because if you're in an airport and you say bomb, you best believe the security from the entire airport is gonna tackle you and drag you into a side room somewhere and interrogate you for 6 months. What happens if you say it while you're on a plane in the air? Like, do they have to make an emergency landing somewhere? Do they pull you aside and search everything? Like, we didn't know what happened, so we just had an amusing conversation about it the rest of the time over this. And there was 1 or 2 times I glanced behind me and there were like the cracks between the seats. I think the people behind us, because we were cracking up so much and showing each other our phones, I think they might have seen a little bit of the conversation we were having, but like they didn't say anything. So I don't know if they think we're terrorists, but we're not. It just was a wonderful mood easer during that stressful situation. But then, as the plane came down to land, we were having this little message conversation, cracking up. I was in a much better mood. Dan was in a much better mood. They say we're getting ready to start the final descent, and suddenly I have to go to the bathroom. You know you never have to go to the bathroom until you can't go to the bathroom. And I had to go, and immediately those seatbelt lights came on. They start the descent, and they can't land. There was too much snow on the runway because, again, January. There was too much snow on the runway, so they couldn't land until they got a runway cleared for us. So they are just circling the airport, and I'm sitting here with my bladder expanding at alarming rates. Like, I'm trying to cross my legs, I'm rocking back and forth, I'm adjusting, I'm like looking around, I'm like, think of not water things. It's bad. It got to be so bad, like I was in physical pain. It was so painful because I had to go so bad, but I was just clenching everything so tightly, and like my entire abdomen just ached. Finally it got to the point I did not think I could physically stand up without peeing my pants. It was so intense, and I like, my train of thought, I'm not even joking, my train of thought was, I have my carry-on bag at my feet. I have another pair of jeans in that carry-on bag.
What I'm gonna have to do is I'm gonna have to wait until everybody gets off the plane, because I'm gonna pee myself. So I'm gonna have to essentially stand up so I pee on my jeans and not the seat, and then waddle my wet pants to the bathroom so I can change and then get off the flight.
I was resolved to do this because at this point it was so bad. So the plane finally is able to land, and then we're taxiing like slower than a snail to our terminal, to our gate, and we finally get there, and I told Dan, I said, I think I'm gonna try to make a run for it to the bathroom. And so the second the plane lands, my seatbelt is off. I'm like, I need to be ready for the second that seatbelt light comes off. I need to be able to jump up and fly past everybody to the back of the plane. So I'm like preparing myself. The second that light went off, I bolted, and I think people could tell what was happening because nobody got out of their chair too fast. Everybody cleared the aisle and let me just fly past them. Luckily, I made it. I did not need to change my jeans. I was okay. So I was able to get off the plane. We were able to connect to a different flight and go home. Now for the last plane story that I have for you today. And this one is a doozy. This one is the title of the video. We were once again going back to the Midwest to visit family, and we got on our plane in Charlotte, flew to Atlanta, no problems. Everything was smooth. It was great. It was refreshing. We thought, could this be a turn in our travel lives? No. We get to Atlanta, we get to our gate to get onto the plane to go to Indiana. We get on the plane, where everybody's sitting, everybody's situated, ready to go. The plane starts taxiing out, it gets into the air, we're rising in altitude, and all of a sudden we hear this huge bang. And the plane starts shaking like there's some intense turbulence going on, and everybody is like, what just happened? And it's not stopping. Like, this turbulence is still going on. The stewardesses are even like, what is happening? Now, there is a group of girls that were probably high school age on this flight as well, and they were all a couple of rows ahead of us. And one of these girls, it was so obvious it was her very first time on an airplane. And this poor thing is shaking like a leaf on a tree. Everybody's trying to comfort her, and when we were all still in the terminal, they were all like, oh, it's fine, nothing ever happens, takeoff and landing is the hardest because of your ears, it'll be fine. It wasn't fine. The whole plane is just shaking like crazy, and we're all like, what is happening? Like, are we going to crash? And the stewardesses are like talking to the pilot over their little phones, and like they're trying to stay calm, but you can tell they have no idea what's going on. And finally one of the stewardesses gets on the phone to do an intercom talk, and she basically says, hey, just to let you know, we're turning around and going back to Atlanta. Sorry for the delay. And that's it. And so the plane turns around, and now we're watching, we had not gotten full altitude yet, right? We were still taking off and rising when all of this happened. Like, we weren't just off of the ground though either. Like, if the plane just stopped and fell, like, we all would have died. We were pretty high up there. So the plane turns around, and again, Dan and I are right next to the window, so we're watching the descent. This was like a nosedive. The plane went down so fast. There was no like safety precautions being taken. He was going for that landing, and he did it pretty smoothly too, actually, though. Like, I was genuinely surprised at how not rough of a landing, like touching down, that was. It was very well done on his part. We were watching, there was no like attempting to slow down, so it was a smoother transition. Like, he just went and we were on the ground. We hadn't even hit the ground yet, and we can see there's like 5 airplane specialty fire trucks, and there's like an entire string of cop cars. They all start following us the second we hit down. Dan and I are like, what happened? Because there's this stream of like emergency vehicles following us. Nobody is saying anything. Finally, we stop. Like, we hadn't even gotten to our gate yet. Like, they just stopped at one of the side runways. The pilot comes over the intercom and he goes, "Hey everybody, so sorry for all of that. We had to make an emergency landing. One of our engines blew out during takeoff." What? One, I'm very glad he didn't say anything until after we landed. 2, this poor girl is scarred for life. So Dan and I are sitting there, and I kid you not, the first thought that comes into my mind when he said that was, I really hope we get to go down the inflatable slide thing that shoots out the side of airplanes. We never did, which was very disappointing. That would have made everything worth it. Luckily, they got the plane landed. Everything was fine. They had to wait for a gate to open so they could actually pull in and let all of us off of the plane so they could fix the broken engine that just failed midair on us. We all get off of the plane, and they're like, as far as we know, the part that we think it is relatively small. We're gonna see if we can't just replace it and all will be well, or if there's another plane we can use. Time is just going by. Everybody's getting frustrated now because they're like, we need to get on to like connecting flights. They told us after like 30 minutes, they were like, no, the flight is just flat out canceled. You all have to go to the help desk and book a different flight. The help desk people were just swamped with this entire plane load of people that were mobbing them to get plane tickets. And we are calling his mom and we're like, what are our options? Do you want us to sleep here overnight and try to get a flight tomorrow? Everybody is trying to get different flights elsewhere, or trying to wait for the next available flight to the airport we were all trying to get to. And his mom is like, okay, this airport and this airport are within the same traveling distance from us. So if you can get to either of those, that's great. Or you can fly into Chicago where your brother can pick you up. We finally get up to the help desk and we were like, we've already heard you say there's no flights to this destination, but do you have any available flights to this destination? And she looked it up and she goes, yes, we do. That flight takes off in like 2 hours. And we're like, we'll take it. We were able to rebook our flight for that flight. We got on there. No engines broke during that takeoff. And we got to his mom's and we got to her house and it was like midnight when we got there. We were supposed to get there in time for supper and to have dinner with family because his brother was also there visiting. After that, we decided we're willing to take the 2 extra days off for vacation time just to drive there and back, and we only had one issue driving I don't even know how many times now we've driven, and we're gonna just keep driving because it's far less stressful. Those were some of the crazy airplane stories that I've had. Please let me know in the comments below if you have had any crazy experiences. Let me know if stories like this are the reason you don't fly, because again, that one girl, I swear she is never going to fly again ever. Like, I felt really bad for her because she was freaking out, and I was just sitting over here angry I didn't get to go down the inflatable slide. Let me know if you like this story time type video. Let me know if you want to see more like this, because I'm sure I have other crazy stories that I could tell. If you enjoyed this, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe so you don't miss any new videos that I make, and I will see you guys later. Bye!